Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will bring the Board of Finance and Audit Committee meeting for California High-Speed Rail Authority this 15th day of September of 22 to order. If the Secretary will just record that of the colleagues who are here on this committee, everyone is here with the exception of Director Gilmetti.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before we get started, Mr. Secretary, would you advise the public how they can address this committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Before we begin public comment, I would like to go over some important information. For members of the public who have joined us in person and wish to provide public comment, you will be called in the order we have received your card. If you not have provided me your public comment card and wish to provide a public comment, now would be your time to provide that card. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. We are also allowing members of the public to provide comment remotely by telephone. After in-person public comment, we will begin remote public comment over the telephone. Do any members of the public wish to provide public comment in person? Lois, do we have any members on the phone who wish to provide public comment at the moment? In queue?
If you do want to provide public comment, please press 1 then 0. And at this time, there's no one in queue.
Thank you, Lois. Mr. Chairman, we do not have any public comment at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We will then move to our agenda items. Item number 1 today is the consideration of the August 18th meeting minutes. And do either of my colleagues have any changes or additions or deletions? And if not, do we have a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you, Director Camacho and Vice Chair Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Passed unanimously. I will spare you from any comments from myself today, and we'll move on to item number 3, which is the executive summary from our Chief Financial Officer. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. So I'm presenting the financial reports executive summary. This is the first report of the new fiscal year, so we're starting to report now on the month of July 2022. We do have a couple format changes to this report. We typically, for this report, look to update at the beginning of the fiscal year. So as we go through today, I'll point out some of the updates. There we go. So this page is fairly similar. This is our reporting of accounts payable and aging, and as well as disputes report. You'll note here our disputes are down a little bit month over month. As we've stated before, those are predominantly made up of the Dragados invoices that have been submitted, where they've sometimes submit items that aren't yet approved for payment, but that's down a bit month over month. We also happy to report no late payments for that month. We did simplify this one a bit. We'd previously been reporting the number of invoices in the pipeline, but now we've more conformed that to the standard reporting and are just reporting those actually paid in the month. At the bottom half of the page is the cash management report, which is fairly similar. We have added a summation row at the bottom of that table to give the sum of the 3 different cash accounts we have. And note month over month, all the 2 big funds are down a bit. Prop 1A cash balance down a bit. This isn't bond authority, but this is cash in the bank. And then our cap and trade, we didn't reflect any credits for new auctions for that month of July, so that's down a bit due to spending on the construction project. We did report, believe I notified the board members by email that our August cap and trade auction The preliminary results are about 161 million. The August auction is where the offsets occur for legislation AB 398 of 2017 and also a newer bill, SB 155, primarily related to fire prevention, and these are cap and trade revenues that are paid first before the 25% portion for high-speed rail is calculated. Next slide. So next is our administration budget for the fiscal year. Again, this first month of the fiscal year, July. This is the number the board approved at the full board meeting last month. 93.4 million is the operations budget. Our expenditure for the month of July was 4.7 million. And our vacancies were reduced a bit. We hired a net of 10 employees in the month of July. So that vacancy rate has been falling the last couple months, and we're down to about 27.7% for this reporting. Next page, capital outlay budget summary. Again, this is the number the board adopted in full board last month, a $2.3 billion budget. Our expenditures for the month of July were 67.3 million. And in the middle of the page, third bullet, we list the expenditures on the construction packages specifically, and the three totaled about 48 million for the month. Next page, we provide the cumulative expenditures since 2006, $9.85 billion, 76% being on construction. The table on the second half of the page is new. We had previously focused on the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or ARA grant, and where we were with meeting the match for that grant. And of course, we met the match, I believe, about 18 months ago, fully approved by the Federal Railroad Administration. So we thought what's more relevant now for reporting is giving you a comprehensive look at all of our federal grants and the status of each of them. So you'll see that the ARA is still reported at top, and we have fully received all the ARA funds, and we have zero match remaining for that one. The federal fiscal year 10 grant is the second, 929 million. That one is, per agreement with FRA, intended to be the last dollars in to our Central Valley construction of the 119-mile segment. So we haven't expended any of those dollars yet, nor the match credit for that, but that'll come later as we finish up the 119-mile segment. We also have the small EPA Brownfield Grant, $600,000. And happily, the two we've recently added to the bottom, the first raise grant from November of 21 for the Highway 46 project in Wasco. And then just last month, we received the new raise grant of $25 million for advancing design on the extension to Merced. The contracts and expenditure report is, I believe, unchanged from before. We currently have 217 active contracts. Total value of those contracts, $9.86 billion. Fairly similar to a month ago. And we report our small business statistics. The utilization rate, which is cumulative, is 23.3%. And that we are actively working with about 724 small businesses through contracts and subcontracts. And 230 of those are disadvantaged business enterprises, and 83 are certified disabled veteran business enterprises. This slide on contingency reporting is really the same information that we report and have been reporting, but we've updated the format a little bit. I think it's more efficient. We found we had some duplication in some of the reporting before, so this allows a larger font size and I think easier identification of the key information. So on the top chart, again, we start with our total allocation of contingency and how much has been assigned. We have a column for a monthly authorized use of contingency under 25 million, column for change orders or contract amendments that use contingency over 25 million, and lastly, we show the cumulative authorized and remaining balance. Like before, we do highlight any of these that are larger than 25 million on the bottom chart, and we have two. We have 101.5 million, which was a change order executed with the CP1 contractor for the Highway 99 Guideway section. The board will recall that the Caltrans shifted Highway 99 about 100 yards to the west to make room for high-speed rail between the highway and the freight line. And there was a time when the authority had thought of contracting with Caltrans to do the Guideway work for high-speed rail, but as that design was finalized, it was determined it was better for the design builder contract to do that work because it's fairly similar to other work they've been doing for us. So that is the the change order that will build that, I believe it's about 2.5 mile section and put the infrastructure that high-speed rail needs in that segment. Lastly, the RDP time
Brian,
extent.
if I could just interrupt you, Mr. Chair, is that all right? On that contingency, I know we have a contingency account, a budget. Is that within that amount? Is it within our contingency budget?
Oh, yeah, so that is out of CP1.
Right.
And so if you look at the first row on the top chart, it shows CP1. And you can see, I guess, the third column in of numbers is the
Oh,
same
I'm sorry.
101 million.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
My fault.
So we did reduce the remaining contingency
it.
due to that.
Yeah. Good thing Brian's to my left.
And the last item here is 26.1 million. And this is something that the board was made aware of in February when we brought to you the request to proceed with the new contract to replace the RDP. We had at that same time indicated we were extending WSP, the current RDP, beyond the June 22 contract end date. And that a total of $90 million was allocated to that WSP contract, both to get WSP to June of 22, and then for certain transitional functions, extend them longer into 22, 23. And some of their work is going to continue until June of 23, but other scope will be rolling off in the coming months. So the 26 million is just the share of that 90 million that was identified from the contingency to fund that work. Finally, this is our what we call internally the flash report, the initial look at what we expect to report to you next month. So this is preliminary data for August. The month-over-month numbers are very similar here. You'll see our total capital expenditures look like they're coming in around $67 million, which was about the same again as the $67 million reported for July. We made another gain in, looks like hiring another about 10 net state positions. So we've had a real good 3 months here. I think we're up about 30 positions over 3 months. So the hard work's starting to show up in our reducing vacancy rates. And lastly, on the bottom right, we also updated the federal grant summary to not exclusively focus on the ARA grant, but give you a broader view of all of our federal grants. So we show the cumulative total of grants that have been awarded. We do show in the second row the new grants awarded, so the $25 million raise grant from that came in August. And then we show the pending grant applications. So we do still have about $1.3 billion of submitted grants, and these are all in this federal program called Mega Projects. We expect those awards to be announced either in October or November. Yeah, we wait for those. In the meantime, we have other grants that we're preparing. There's a program called the Rail Crossing Elimination Program with applications due in October. And there's also a federal program called CRISI that recently put out a notice, and those applications will be due in December. And then the largest federal program under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is called the Fed-State Partnership for Intercity Rail, and that's a national pot outside the Northeast Corridor of $12 billion. So we expect early part of next year we'll be applying for that, and that'll probably be our largest dollar grant application. That concludes my financial report. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Annis. I see no questions from my colleagues. Let me just ask you a couple of quick things. With regards to going back to page 4 and looking at the percentage of expenditure of the contracts that we've got for the CPs, have we yet got a correlation between the percentage of the contracts that have been expended versus the percentage of completion of those contracts?
I believe the answer to your question is we have some information on the last bullet. Let me point to that first. So we do in the fourth bullet in the middle of the page report the expenditure as a percentage of current contract value, but I believe what you're referring to probably is more the budget for each contract.
Yeah. Well, the question is, if we spent 75% of a contract, are we 75% complete with the project? Or should there not be a direct correlation between the percentage spent and the percentage of completion? Because it could be that the costs are loaded in the first half of the project, for instance.
Right.
But what I'm really looking for, if we don't have it, one, how do we get it, and when do you think it will be?
Yeah.
And it might be for Mr. Horgan, and he's up and ready to come forward,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, and I think we do have that in CP4, which Daniel will cover in his upcoming report.
Okay.
And we do want to add that in the coming months for CP1 and 2-3. The factor that we're waiting for is to put those last few large change orders in,
Okay.
so that we have an established schedule and cost for those with the contractor.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that the other thing that can be, a conclusion that can be drawn, we've been flat on our small business utilization rate, you know, the 23.3 or 23.4 or that sort of thing. And always it's predicated on the expectation that the increases will be as we spool up construction, which when we look at, you know, what the expenditures are on our DB contracts, they're reasonably flat also. So is that the reason that, do you think is that a reason from which we can draw the conclusion that that's the reason that we're not moving closer to the 30%, because construction still has not spooled up? And if that's the case, when will that happen? And I think that's not really for you, but Dan, when you come up, if you can address those in your report, that would be good.
Can I just make a comment about that? I think it's important to note on the small business utilization rate, the fourth bullet underneath the chart that's in the executive report notes
Right.
that The report reflects a 23.3% utilization rate, which is a 7% increase since we started reporting this in 2015. At that time, it was
Right.
about 16.2%.
That's right.
So it is up almost 50% from when we started in terms of the percentage of use.
We just weren't doing very much construction back then. so-
Right. And I think I would say to you, too, that where you see the 30% rate hit typically is on our professional services contracts.
Yeah.
And in the construction side, and this is also true with Caltrans, the construction side tends to lag well below a 30% number. So you're not going to see a 30% on construction. It'll be something less.
Okay.
But overall, you see the 30% be hit on professional services contracts and something less on the construction. And so we'll get a net total of around this 23, 24, 25% as we go. That's my expectation.
I think that's important for the board to know. It was always a strong position of the board to not have an aspirational goal, but actually achieve that goal. But I think that the way you've just explained it, Brian, I'm not sure that we've heard that clearly before. And if we have, maybe it was a while ago and we don't recall.
Yeah, I mean, our rates of small business utilization compared with, for example, Caltrans, we are absolutely on par, if not exceeding, on some of those things. And of course, the participation rates differ whether it's a federal or state funding as well. So there's different elements that come to bear on this. This is why we began the conversation some time ago about how we report these things, to make sure that we can reflect we're meeting all the applicable goals. And I know there's a broad goal of 30% here at the authority. As I said, we're up from when we first started reporting that, and we'll continue to work hard to get to that objective. But I expect it will creep there instead of leap there. Okay.
All right,
But
thank you.
is our numbers a blended rate of both hard construction and professional services?
I think in this case it is, yes.
So if you were to segregate them, our numbers would not be as great as we compare them against Caltrans, because they're mostly hard bid.
No, that's not true, because Caltrans doesn't, this is, I mean, we may twirl on this for a while, but Caltrans reports extremely differently than we do. They report their small business participation rates based on the dollar that's used on the contract. If it's a state dollar, they report it one way. If it's a federal dollar, they report it another way. They exceed the federal standards on the federal funded contracts, and so do we. We have a different goal that this board has expressed from back in 2015 or 16 of 30% across the board. And we're working hard to hit that. On the professional services contracts, we are hitting that. We are at about 30%. On the construction ones, it's something less because it's more in line with typical construction participation rates.
Thank you, Mr. Annis. Mr. Horgan, welcome.
Good morning, Chair
I'm
Richards.
sorry, this will be the Central Valley Status Report. It's item tab 10 in our package. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Richards and F&A committee members. Okay, this is the Central Valley Status Report for July. So I have highlighted areas in yellow so it's easier for you to follow along if you're looking at the screen. So in terms of contractors' expenditures for the month of July, we had a total of 47.8 million. That was made up of construction package 1 was 13.3 million, construction package 2-3 was 27 million, and construction package 4 was 7.5 million. In terms of change orders, we executed 8 change orders for a total of 9.1 million in July. In terms of risk contingency, as of the end of July, our risk contingency stood at 1,024.5 million. As reported previously, all the permanent infrastructure design is completed. That means all the Guideway is 100% designed, viaducts, overbridges, everything. However, and I will talk more about this later, utility designs are not completed. And I've got more details that I can share with you on utilities. Okay, in terms of construction labour, we had an average labour count of 1,113 for the month of July, which was practically the same as the month of June. And you will see when I come to the flash report, there's an increase in the month of August. Next slide, please. Okay, in terms of construction progress, we have 67 structures. in construction or completed out of a total of 93. That is the same as the last period. However, we are advancing the structures that are in construction. In terms of Guideway, we've got 87 miles of Guideway in construction or completed out of a total of 119. Now let's come to utility relocations. Utility relocations is an area of extreme focus at the moment because obviously we need to move utilities before we can do permanent construction. So in terms of utilities, for the month of, we relocated 8 in the month of July. That brings the total relocated to 870. We've also got another 370 utilities in progress, and we've got another 62 approved to start. There are still a significant number that haven't started. That's 561. So of these, design is one of the significant issues. So of all our utilities, we've got 77% design completed. So in addition to completing design, there are other activities that we need to complete as well to get utilities done, such as environmental clearances. We need to get environmental clearances, we need to get design approvals. We also need to get work plans approved, pre-construction, walkthroughs, acquisition of real property, and our land conveyance rates. And when we come to the slide on utilities in a few moments, I will give you some more statistics on the design per contract.
Okay.
Okay, in terms of real property, in the month of July, there were 3 more parcels of land handed over to the design build contractors. This was in accordance with our plan. Next slide, please. Okay, in environmental clearance, everybody's aware of the significant progress on environmental clearance. And the only item to be highlighted is in the last board meeting, the San Jose to San Francisco environmental clearance was approved by the board. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide is the histogram of contractors' expenditures. This is a total of CP1, CP23, and CP4. The July figure was 48 million. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the risk contingency drawdown. So based on change orders that are progressing through governance at the moment, we anticipate that the contingency will stand at 727 million by the end of October. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the trend line of construction labor. So as you can see, June and July, and we're pretty similar. The August figure, which I'll come to later, has increased, which is good news. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the planned Guideway and planned structures construction progress. This is going to be rebaselined when we agree new schedules in the very near future. But at the moment, it's indicating that there are 2 miles of Guideway that are behind. One of those miles is on CP1. That is in the Jensen Trench. That is delayed because there are 4 complex utilities that need to be relocated. And we're hyper-focused on resolving those. But that is a significant challenge. On CP23, we have 1 mile that's called the Dutch John Cut area of Guideway. That is delayed because of design. Design has been approved. We've also just received the environmental permit there. So we anticipate going to construction there in October. So that's positive news. We are 4 structures behind as well in terms of getting structures to work. 2 of those are on CP1. There's the Central Avenue. That is delayed because of a third-party agreement with Malaga. Dennis Kim, who is in charge of right-of-way and third parties, is actively engaged in resolving that third-party agreement. We anticipate that will be resolved in the coming months. We also have a similar issue with Avenue 17, where we have another third-party agreement. This third-party agreement is being advanced, but like all third-party agreements, there's a little bit of toing and froing. So we mark up what we think should be in the agreement, and then the third party marks up theirs. So both of those structures should be, they will be in construction in January. So we are focusing very hard on those. One of the reasons that's going to be pushed out to January is because we have the railroad moratorium as well, which kicks in the middle of November. So that delays us until the 1st of January to start. Okay, we also have 2 structures on CP23. One of them is the Grangeville. So that was delayed because of an SCE transmission line. That is now in progress, and we will get the construction there in October, which is positive. We also have another sort of simple structure. It's called ATTT. We've got the environmental permit for that, and that will go to construction as well in October. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is the utility slide. So utilities are an area of extreme focus at the moment. So in July, we relocated 8 utilities. We got another 11 in August. So to expedite utilities, which are obviously very important, Denniskim has been charged with third parties, resolving agreements, and in addition to that, we have increased the regularity of executive meetings with third parties. Brian Kelly's been involved in several of these meetings recently, and we have made good progress with PG&E and some other significant third parties. We're also planning more executive outreach to the railroads to make them more aware of our concerns and also to engage their staff. In terms of design, I can give you some statistics on design. So for CP1, there's 870 packages fully designed out of a total of 992, so that's 88% for utilities. On CP23, the figure is slightly lower, it's 62% of design completed. On CP4, the utility design is at 81%. And this will increase significantly as we advance the semi-tropic designs, which we anticipate in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, next slide, please.
If we could,
Tom,
Mr.
of course.
Chairman, I just wanted to ask,
Turn your mic on.
before we move on, I just wanted to ask our CEO if you have any additional comments on utilities.
I do. I really want to use this as a moment to step back and look at where we are on a month-to-month basis and the importance of this utility issue getting resolved so that the floodgates can flow a little more freely on the construction pace. And so just looking at the last 5 months of 2021 compared to the first 5 months of 22, our monthly construction expenditure rate is up about 35%. So that's a significant improvement. However, the key reason that you guys are not seeing the free flow of pure construction, particularly on CP1 and 2-3, is because these are the places we are working hard to advance the utility relocations. And there are so many of them. And I want to just pause for a moment and say, as these get solved, the construction numbers will then pick up. And the amount of utility relocations are significant in Fresno, particularly on CP1. As you know, and according to this chart, there's some 992 there. About half of those are, less than half of those are done, about 33%. Another 30% are underway, and about a third are still yet to be started. So that is where we are, but it's also important to know that on the pace of utility relocations, this year we will set our record for the most done in a year, about 200 on CP1. It did taken us 3 years to do a total of about 300. And so we're going to do 200 this year, and next year our goal is 300 in the next fiscal year. So we are moving these at a pace we never have before. As I said, our monthly expenditures on construction are certainly up in 22 versus 21, but we got to move this stuff to get to full charge, if you will, on construction mode. And these are the tricks that are left. On CP4, where we are hoping to complete that construction, and our estimating will complete that in early 2023. March is our schedule right now. We have a full court press on the single most substantial third party down there, which is the Semi-Tropic Water Storage District, and we work with them very carefully and diligently on reviewing designs that Daniel talked about, us getting them put together with the contractor, giving them a review period to look at them, taking those comments, making any changes, and moving forward. And so this is a delicate exercise, but it's one that we are advancing on. I spent 5 hours in Wasco the other day to work through how we will continue to work collectively with Semi-Tropic, and we're holding on to our schedule there right now. So as we get the scope fully defined on 1 and 2, 3, it will be entirely about moving these utilities before we start moving construction at the pace we all want to see it at. But that's what's in front of us. And I just wanted to point out the importance of that utility relocation issue.
Thank you, Brian. Daniel, go ahead.
Okay, next slide, please. Oh, we've got it already. So this slide shows the histogram of parcels of land that we're delivering to the design build contractor. In the month of July, there were 3 parcels delivered, and when we come to the flash report, there are 10 parcels delivered in August. So this is on plan. Next slide, please. This slide shows the delivery of the railroad parcels to the design build
So,
contractors.
hey, Daniel, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I just want to go back. Of
course.
Again, I want to just make sure that people are reading the chart on slide 10 correctly. We had estimated at the beginning of this year when we brought in the new leadership in the right-of-way division that we'd be at 90% right-of-way completion by July. Today, we're just under 92%, so we're slightly in front of that. We're estimating a completion of 95% by the end of 2022, and we have to average about 10 or 11 parcels a month to hit that. And just so you know what we need to be at as we go forward for the remaining part of the year. I do think we are all expecting to hit that mark, though. So you'll want to see about 10 to 12 parcels each month coming before you as approved on right-of-way. Thanks.
Okay,
Brian, are you engaged in much of this activity as well? Yeah.
Yes, I am.
What lessons could we learn from going, so we wouldn't be in this position again?
Yeah, I love that question because it's the easiest one to answer. You know, don't repeat the process we did on the early construction packages. And what that means simply is why we have put in place what we call this stage gate process going forward. We will not commence construction without right-of-way entirely in hand and the utilities identified and relocated. And that's the thing. When we got into construction without those things done, that means we got into construction at great risk. And we've been playing catch up ever since. And so I think those are the key elements. Also, you know, we've been defining still some of the scope, and that we're coming to the end of that finally. And so all of the scope of these contracts are now defined, and now it's just about getting the right-of-way done and getting the utilities moved. And as we complete more and more of that, we'll pick up the construction pace. Going forward, we will not be in this position.
So it's utilities, but it's also the third-party agreements.
Oh, yeah.
Outside utilities, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
But I mean, it's also fair to say that if we're faced with, in the future, if we're faced with a alternative of either accepting or not accepting a federal grant or a grant from anybody because of the requirement to expend the funds by X date, it presents a conundrum for us to determine whether the risk is worth the receipt of the funds.
Yes, I would call that never say never.
That's right. Thank you. Go ahead.
great. Okay, this slide shows the delivery of the railroad parcels to the design build contractor. In the month of July, there were 13 parcels delivered. So we are ahead of target with the delivery of railroad parcels. Okay, next slide, please. This slide shows the land conveyance. For some utility companies, we need to provide land conveyance packages prior to utility cutover. And to date, we have secured 669 parcels approved. We have 245 parcels to go in terms of land conveyance, and of these, 180 are at 85% complete. So they're just waiting for the land acquisition to finalize the titles. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the earned value slide. Okay, so good news here. The solid blue line is significantly above the yellow dotted line. And this indicates that we are on target, as Brian said earlier, for completion the 1st of March 2023. The scheduled performance indicator is 0.98, which is a very credible figure. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the cost trend. So at the end of July, the forecast expenditure was 618 million. The actual was 577 million. There is a reason for this. The reason we're behind on expenditure here is that the Canal 922 was resequenced. So that's been delayed. So when we plug that resequencing back in, it indicates that we will complete by the 1st of March. Next slide, please. Okay, the preliminary numbers, as you can see, construction labour looks like 1,188, which would be, if that's confirmed, that will be an all-time record of construction labour on this programme. So that would be positive news, subject to confirmation. In terms of delivery of right-of-way parcels, there were 10 more parcels delivered in the month of August. Executed change orders, we're still working through the exact figures there. It's showing negative at the moment. That was because there was a provisional sum amount for 31 million deducted from the CP4 contract, but that is again subject to review. In terms of utility relocations, there were another 11 utilities relocated in the month of August. That concludes the report. Thank you.
Excuse me, any questions for Mr. Horgan? Daniel, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. You're welcome.
Do either of my colleagues have anything further today? Questions, comments, or? Okay. Okay. Thank you then, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the agenda. We invite you to be with us at 10 o'clock this morning, which will be for the Board of Directors meeting for the month of September. That'll be 10 a.m. this morning. So thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned.